Let me see what time. Okay. Okay. All right. I'd like to thank everybody for being here. Thank y'all for attending our Early Steps webinar. Just to go ahead and get a few things out of the way before we get started. We will be having our presentation, and we will have a survey, and we ask that y'all complete our survey if y'all don't mind, and send that back to us. We will be sending out the PowerPoint. We'll send out the certificate and information to y'all, along with some resources so that y'all will have with the PowerPoint as well. So if y'all have any questions, y'all, or y'all can definitely ask and put your questions in the chat. We will definitely answer them as to the best of our ability. If I don't know the answer, Wallace is here. He's here to assist us. And if we don't know the answer, we have Miss Melinda. She's been here for years. She can definitely help us. Miss Susan is our director. She's been here for years. She can definitely help us. So if we don't know the answer, we can definitely get the answer for you. So I just wanted to put that out there. So if I don't know it, I can find it. Okay, so here we go. So our first slide goes over LaCan, and I do have Miss Melinda here, and she is our LaCan leader, and she will go over and give us the information about LaCan. Miss Melinda, are you on?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can. Can you give us some information about LaCan?
I sure can. And I think you put too much faith in my knowing anything. I might know some things about some things, but there's lots of things I don't know anything about. For example, Zoom. I had trouble getting on this morning, but anyway, I'm here now. One of the roles that I have at Families Helping Families is LaCan. It stands for the Louisiana Council's Advocacy Network. LaCan's a statewide advocacy group where people with disabilities, where people that have family members with developmental disabilities and other disabilities, professionals, some legislators are LaCan members. We work on home and community-based services for people with developmental disabilities. So when I say that, I tell people, think about waivers, think about now waivers, support waivers, children's choice. What else? Oh, the row waiver. Think about individual and family supports. Think about the flexible family fund. All of those are things that we work on for people with developmental disabilities. We also work on education. So things that don't work right in education, some of those things are going to be covered under federal law. And I'm one of the education specialists too. I do a little bit of everything, but we'll be able to talk about whether it's something covered under federal law and there's one avenue to deal with it, or whether it's something that could be done legislatively, because that's mostly what we do with LaCan. We work on legislative issues. I just had a community input meeting, and I am in the process of making flyer, choosing a date, doing all of those little things to have a second community input meeting. Community input is where we go to people that are actually in Louisiana, people on the ground, people that are taking care of people with developmental disabilities, people that have children in receiving special education services. And we ask them, so tell us what isn't working. Tell us what isn't fair or doesn't work smoothly, and let's talk about it. So during my last meeting, I had a couple of mothers that brought up early steps, which you're fixing to hear about today, and the fact that early steps covers two deficits in two areas. And years ago, the child could have deficits in one area and still qualify for early steps, and that they'd like to go back to that. I mean, we know early steps is research-based. We know it's a program on a federal level that works. We need to use it for those little ones as early as we can to catch them up and keep them up, right? What was the other thing that somebody told me about? Somebody told me, I don't know if it was on the community input meeting, about LRS, Louisiana Rehabilitative Services, and the funding that they get. The state puts up a certain amount and the federal government matches it to a larger amount. Well, we know our state never puts up enough to get the full federal match. And every once in a while, this subject comes up. What are other things we do? Years ago, we've done stuff about restraints and seclusion, about the April Dunn Act, about ABA services, well, behavioral services in the school systems, including ABA. Some people have, I think that was one of them that might have come up during the community input meeting, is that ABA services in some school systems is almost impossible, and that it should be equitable across parishes. Let's see. Anyway, you sign up for LeCan. What are you signing up for? It's free. You're signing up to get emails. You're going to learn more than you ever thought you were going to learn about the disability system if you read the emails. And we sometimes we have attachments that give you the backstory, right? You will get emails about things going on before and during the legislative session. And then about education, you may get emails year round. There's not a lot year round, but right before and during legislative session, there's a lot. Because, things are cooking, things come up that we don't anticipate. And then, of course, we have our own legislative agenda that we're working on with those community input meetings. So I hope sometimes, lots of times, when you get those emails, you send an email to your legislator, and it'll tell you in the email who your guy, they're all guys in Southwest Louisiana, or gal is if you happen to be here from another area outside of the 5 parishes in Southwest Louisiana. Some of you will be interested in telling your story. I have lots of opportunities to tell your story. Membership meetings, legislative visits. Every year we have a legislative roundtable, committee meetings in Baton Rouge, maybe. I mean, that's a pretty high level meeting, but still I have parents from this area that have gone many times to talk about different issues. I invite you to join. If I know Wallace, he's already dropped a link in the chat, or will shortly. When you get this PowerPoint, the link at the bottom is a hot link. Please join. And you don't have to wait to see if you see something about a community input meeting. You know something that's not working right, y'all call me. Y'all shoot me an email. Is there any questions? Can I see the chat? Let's see. Yep, Wallace hit the chat box with the link to join. Thank you, Wallace. And I think I'm done, China.
Thank you, Miss Melinda. Do appreciate you giving us that information. Okay, so Early Steps is a system of supports and services designed to enable families and to help their child progress and develop and improve their child's functions within their daily routines. One of the very first things that I typically tell my parents is that in Early Steps, everything is family centered. So that is what we do. It is centered around the family. It's centered around what the child does on a daily basis and what the family does on a daily basis. Okay. Okay, so who is eligible? So the child must be from birth to age 3, but not past their 3rd birthday. They must live in Louisiana. They must be diagnosed with a medical condition that has a high probability of resulting in a developmental delay, or they must have an assessment and that is used on the BDI-2. So that's the assessment that is used whenever they're scoring in Early Steps, is they're using the BDI-2. So these are the areas that they're looking at. They're looking at physical development, cognitive, social and emotional, adaptive, and communications. Earlier, Ms. Melinda had mentioned that there are 2 areas, and there used to be one. It used to be one area. So the one area would be like physical development, and then it would be a subdomain. So a subdomain would be like listening skills under communication, and expressive and expressing self, or expressive language, something like that. So it didn't have to be physical development and communications. So it could be just a domain and then a subdomain. So now it has to be 2 domains in order for you to qualify, whereas before it was 1 domain and a subdomain. So that was the difference in what she was talking about earlier, to whereas the criteria has tightened. So I just kind of wanted y'all to understand that. Okay, the autism screening, part of the eligibility process includes an autism screening. This does not mean that it is an autism evaluation. What it means is that it's a screening, and it screens for red flags. So you use this screening and you go and you give it to your doctor and you say, hey, we did this screening. So can we get more testing to see if maybe there is a possibility that my child may have autism? So I like to put that out there because I have had some family members that has taken this screening and say, oh, my baby has autism, where that is not what we're saying. Okay, so I just wanted to explain that so that that is clear. That is just a screening saying there's possibly red flags and you need to take it for further testing. Okay, so the screening is done at an initial, an annual, and an exit for your child at 18 months or older, or at the family's request. And the tool that's being used for this screening is called the BISCUIT. Family cost participation. So they have included family cost participation. And so what they will do is they will get all of the information at the initial and at annuals, so that they can see whether or not you still qualify in order to pay, to see if you have to pay for early steps. If you receive Medicaid, then it's free for services. I know that they do bill insurances. So if you do have an insurance provider, that they can bill an insurance provider. But your FSC do ask for all of this information, and that's not really anything that you as a parent really have to I always tell my parents, really don't really so much stress about those types of things, because really our focus is on the child and it's not so much on those types of things. So, that's what I always tell my parents. So, okay, these are the areas that we're going to focus on. So one is to help you understand how to help your child develop and learn. 2 is to help you communicate your child's needs. 3 is to help you understand your rights in early intervention systems. And 4 is to have a successful transition from early steps at age 3 to exit. Okay. So 1 is to meet your goal. To meet this goal of the child's team, which includes the parents, will design supports to address the need of your child and family to include one or more of the following needs. So we offer 17 different services. So that does not mean that your child will receive all 17 services. It just means that your child will receive one or some of these 17 services. So he may receive one of the ones that are very popular is let's see, thought it was on here, special instructor. Yes. I know that that's one of the popular ones that a lot of my kiddos in this particular area gets, is a special instructor. So you might get a special instructor in maybe like OT. So you may get those two services if your child qualifies for those services. So from that evaluation of the BDI-2, it will tell you what areas your child needs the help in. And so from that, as the team, y'all will sit down and y'all will discuss and say, okay, these are some of the areas that we see that your child needs the assistance in. And of these 17 services, these are the ones that we need to focus on. So that's how that works. Okay, so goal 2, to help you understand your rights in Early Steps, every family in Early Steps is guaranteed the following rights. Okay, so written prior notice, use of parents' native language, parent consent, confidentiality, examination of records, accept or decline services without jeopardizing or refuse to complete or sign documents, resolution of disputes, or child rights to a surrogate parent. Okay, so written prior notice is provided within a reasonable time before Early Steps propose, refuse, or initiate any activities or change for the child or family. So a written prior notice is supposed to be sent before anything happens in Early Steps. So if you having a meeting, you're supposed to send a notification saying that you're having a meeting. If you're having if you're adding a service, you're supposed to send a notice saying that you're having a service added. If you're taking away a service, you're supposed to send notice saying you're taking away a service. If you're changing the location of a meeting, you're supposed to send a written prior notice saying you're changing the location of a meeting. If you're changing the time to a meeting, you're supposed to send a written prior notice saying that you're changing the time of a meeting. So I'm talking about any changes to anything, you're supposed to send a written prior notice. So, so that way that parent knows, okay, we are making a change to either your IFSP, which is your plan of care, or we're making a change to your meetings. We're making a change to your meeting location. So that way your parent knows exactly what's going on at every aspect, at every time of every minute of what's going on in Early Steps and in their child's life when it comes to Early Steps. Okay, so remember, nothing can be proposed or changed unless it is given to you in a written, in writing before it happens. So nothing can be proposed or changed unless it is given to the parent in writing before it happens. So there we go. Okay, in native language. So what this slide actually says is that Early Steps will provide all information in that parent's native language. So if they speak Spanish, everything will be provided in their native language. So it will be provided in Spanish. If they speak, if they're blind, everything will be provided in Braille. So That means if they're having a meeting, that means that FSC is supposed to be working prior to the meeting to make sure that they're bringing someone to that meeting that can speak Spanish. If that person is blind, they're making sure that they can bring someone to that meeting that can sign. So that's what this slide says, that we will provide everything in that person's native language. So that way that parent is getting all the correct information, and we're not having any miscommunication when it comes to early steps. Okay. Okay, so consent. The parent has been fully informed of all information relevant to activity for which consent is sought. This information was provided in the parent's native language or by another appropriate mode of communication. The parent understands and agrees in writing to carry out of an activity for which consent is sought. So everything has to be in writing, just like I said, with written communication. Everything has to be in that parent native language, just as we said before, so that parent can understand and have the proper understanding. So that's why it's in their native language. The parent understands that the granting of consent is voluntary on their part and may be revoked at any time. Consent must be obtained before activity takes place, such as service, for example, and before records are released. So before service can be provided, before service can be taken away, we have to have consent from that parent. So they have to sign in writing saying that that can happen. Okay, confidentiality. We take this very seriously. So the name of the child, the parent's name, or any family members, the address of the child or of the parents, any person identifiable, such as the child or the parent's social security number, or a list of personal characteristics or other information that would make it possible to identify this child. And what I usually explain on this particular slide is we live in an area where we have a lot of rural towns, a lot of rural areas. And so we could be explaining something to where we could give off some personal characteristics and not even really realize it. So if you talk about a child that lives in Benton over by the little blue store at the red light, and that may be the only blue store at the red light because the town is so small. Or like, for example, Cameron. Everybody knows Cameron has one light, and there's one grocery store, Brown's groceries in Cameron. So if you say, oh, you know that little boy that says, I know, we have a kid, yeah, and he stays across the street from Brown's, in Cameron. He's in a wheelchair. Yeah, that's one of our little kids. There's only one grocery store in Cameron by the light. and you just told that he lives across the street. He stays down the street from the red light, and he's in a wheelchair. So you just basically told who the child was, where the child lived, and he's in a wheelchair. So you just basically told that that particular child is receiving services from Early Steps, and now everybody knows who this child is because of the rural population of that particular town in that particular area. So we are not even able to even say that because of those particular types of things. I'm sorry. So yeah, so because of those particular types of things, we're not even able to explain that because of our rural areas. Okay, so examination of records. Parents have the right to inspect and review any records related to their child. Early Steps must respond to any review request no later than 10 days. Copies of some information such as the IFSP and the evaluation is at no cost to the parents. But some of the other documents may cost. And I think at one time it was like 5 cents a page. So I'm not real sure if it's still that, but at one time it was. Parents may also request that records are amended if they believe that the information is inaccurate or misleading. So Early Steps will consider this request and make a decision in a timely manner. Accept or decline services. Parents can change their minds. They do not have to accept all services recommended by the IFSP team. So let's say you receive 5 services from Early Steps. You have PT, you have OT, you have special instructor, you have nutritionist, and you have a social worker. So that is, you have a revolving door of people coming in and out of your home, and you're trying to keep up with all of that. That may be too much. So if you decide you don't want the social worker and the nutritionist anymore, that is your choice. You can refuse to have those 2 providers come to your home and still receive your special instructor, your PT, and your OT. That is your right. You can do that and still have the other 3 come to your home. You can do that. If you still have those other 3 coming to your home, your special instructor, your PT, and your OT, and you say you do that for 6 months, and you're like, man, it's still a lot. And you decide, I don't want the PT and the OT, and you get rid of those. So you just have the special instructor coming, and you have her coming for 3 months, for the next 3 months. And then all of a sudden you and her are not getting along. And you're like, I don't want her coming anymore. I just don't want her coming anymore. And I have some parents that just leave Early Steps altogether because they feel like, well, now the special instructor is not coming, so I guess I'm just no longer in Early Steps. And so they actually just leave Early Steps. You do not have to do that. And when I find my parents that has done that, I tell them, if you would have called me, or if you would have taken my family orientation webinar, you would have known that you would not have had to do that, because you still could keep Early Steps and have your family support coordinator, which is your case manager, as long as you keep that person, you can still have early steps. And that person contacts you by phone quarterly, no, monthly, and has a quarterly visit with you. So, so you can actually just have that particular person and not have those providers coming in and out the home. And then if you decide, like a month or two later and see, I really do feel like my baby really do need those services, then you can tell your provider, well, I think I made a mistake and I really do feel like my baby need those services. Well, then you and your case manager can talk about that. And then y'all can talk about bringing some of those providers back. And you really don't have to start the early step system all over again, as far as like starting the referral process and intake and paperwork and signing and doing all of that stuff all over again. So it's to me, it's a lot easier doing it that way, as opposed to just leaving early steps altogether and having to start that process all over again. When you realize 2 months down the line, oh, my baby really do need early steps and I really have to go back, kind of thing. So I just wanted my parents to know that, okay? Okay, so dispute resolution, you have 3 ways to be able to do this. You have a complaint process where the parents can parent service provider, advocates, service coordinators, members, or employees of public agencies may file an individual complaint. A complaint must be filed in writing and must contain the following information: a statement that the state has violated a requirement of Part C, which is early steps of the IDEA, of the regulation. Therefore, the fact describes the allegation complaint, and the name and the address, the phone number of the complaint, the person filing the complaint, and any identifiable information regarding the involved child, and a proposed resolution of the problem. Okay. So these requirements kind of changed, not, I guess about a year, maybe a little over a year, maybe about 2 years ago. And I wasn't really on board so much when the dispute resolution rules kind of changed, because of this very first one. When they put in that this third little dash, the name and address and phone number of the complaint and the person filing the complaint. Because I have a lot of parents that would love to file a complaint, but they don't want to put their name on filing a complaint. So they're less likely to file a complaint. And so for me, that kind of created an issue with my parents wanting to really say much about an issue. And so that brought on more of the problems of my parents leaving early steps instead of staying and filing a complaint, which my issue was more so of my babies, because the parents didn't want to file the complaint, so they would leave. And my thought was the baby is the ones that are suffering. So I would talk to my parents as much as possible. And so whenever my parents take this webinar, this is my time for me to be able to plead and beg with them to be able to say, if you have an issue, please call me so that I can talk that over with you and we can try to resolve it as best as possible. If you have an issue with your provider, this is an opportunity for me to be able to say we can switch providers if there's an issue with that. If there's an issue with your case manager, with your FSC, we can try switching case managers. We have avenues to be able to work around that. I can get with my regional coordinator. We can work together with that. There are some avenues that we can try to where my parents do not actually have to leave Early Steps, to where our kiddos are the ones that are having to pay the price for that. So, yeah. So yeah, that is where I do that here. So now I'm off my soapbox. Okay, so the second is mediation. It is an attempt to resolve a concern between two or more parties through an objective interventionist of a neutral party. So families are offered to have their concerns addressed by an impartial mediator. The Department of Health and Hospital offer mediation through a division of administrative law. So mediation is voluntary and may result in a binding agreement by both parties. Any discussion that occurs during mediation is confidential. And then the third is due process hearings. So this is done in front of a judge, and it is impartial. DHH also calls this an appeal or a fair hearing. At the hearing, evidence is presented by both parties and may be represented by an attorney. Witnesses may be called. A written decision will be given within 60 days, and records of the proceedings will be provided at no cost. For any type of dispute resolution process, the child may continue to receive any services that are not in dispute. Information about all parents' rights are provided to parents throughout their time in Early Steps. Okay, rights to a surrogate parent. Child rights in Early Steps also protected, and rights to a surrogate parent comes in place when a parent cannot be identified, when a parent cannot be located for a certain period of time, or when a parent is a ward of the state of Louisiana. So this particular slide is usually useful whenever we're talking to like DCFS or CASA, CASA advocates, or CASA volunteers or something like that. So those usually comes in handy. Okay, so goal 3 is to help family effectively communicate their child's needs. So this is where we're going to talk about the IFSP, which is your child's plan of care. We're also going to talk about, as a team, we're going to talk about the team gets together and they talk about your concerns, your priorities, and your resources. As it is in your family assessments. They are called your CPRs. The role of the team of the other team members is to assist you in communicating your needs and the needs of the family and the needs of the child. Okay, so Each eligible child and their family must have an IFSP developed no later than 45 days from the date of the referral at the SPO. So, an IFSP must be developed jointly by the family and appropriate personnel. So as the team, it must be based on the evaluation of the child and the family directive assessment of the family to identify the CPRs of the family and identify of supports and services needed to enhance the family's capacity to meet and develop, to meet the developmental need of the child. Okay, so include supports necessary to enhance the development of the child and the capacity of the family to meet the special needs of the child. An IFSP must be developed at a meeting. It must be reviewed every 6 months or more often as needed. It must be evaluated and revised at an annual meeting, followed in a standard format that is set by EarlySteps, address transition of a child at age 3 or at exit, or obtain a parent's consent before being conducted or before services are provided. Okay, so who is on an IFSP team? So you have the family of the child or of other family members as requested by the child, an advocate of the person or the child from the outside of the family, intake coordinator, which is used at the initial, ongoing service coordinator, person directly involved in conducting the evaluation or the assessment, person who will be providing early intervention services, which is your provider, or the EarlySteps EI consultant may also participate in the IFSP meeting, either in person or by reviewing of records information prior to the meeting as appropriate to assist in interpreting the developmental information. Okay, so your CPRs. Families of all children eligible for EarlySteps are offered the opportunity to identify their unique needs throughout the completion of a family directive assessment called your CPRs, okay, conducted by a qualified person to identify a family's concerns, priorities, and resources to support and services necessary to enhance the family's capacity to meet the developmental need of the child, conducted through the use of CPR tools and through an interview with the family. Your child's team is responsible for collecting the information about your concerns and needs to include it on the IFSP. So the reason for your CPR is to get your concerns, and then we prioritize those. And that is created for your IFSP plan, okay? So my son was actually in EarlySteps. And so the way it works is we actually sat down and my FSC said, okay, so tell me, what are your concerns? So my concerns were he was very, very attached. So I couldn't like go in the kitchen and cook, he was like attached to my leg. I couldn't go and take a shower. He would yell and scream at the top of his lungs if he couldn't see me, if he wasn't on my leg. It was like he had to be next to me. He had to see me at all times. My other concern was it would take us like 3 hours to eat because he was a dancer. So when he would eat, he would take a bite and he would dance. He would dance. He would dance. He would dance. And then he would take another bite and he would dance. He would dance. He would dance. He would dance. And then he would stop and he would play with his cars. And so our feeding time would take forever. So that was another one of my issues. And then he also had speech issues. So those were my 3 concerns. So then the next thing was, how did I want to prioritize those things? So speech was my number 1. His attachment was my number 2. And then feeding time was my number 3. So those were my goals that were on my IFSP. So my goal 1 was to work on his speech. My goal 2 was to work on the attachment time. And then my goal 3 was to work on feeding. And so then we had to figure out measurements to make sure that those goals could be measurable. So like at the time, how many words were he saying? He at the time, I think he was only saying like mama and no. And he was 1. So he wasn't saying very many words. He was 1.5, I think. Yeah, he was almost 2, and he was only saying mama and no. And I think it was like 1 in 3 months or something like that. And so that was my number 1 goal. And so our first priority was to get him up to 5 words. And so we worked on that. And then once he got up to 5 words, our second priority was to get him up to 10 words. So by the time he left EarlySteps, I think he was up to like 12 words. I think it's how far we had gotten him. He was up to like 12 words. By the time he left EarlySteps, I think that's how many words he were up to. It was like 10 or 12 words he was up to. So those are how we made the goals measurable. And then with separation anxiety, the goal was 1 minute, 3 minutes, and then 5 minutes. And so we did get him up to 5 minutes. And so that's how we got our plan together, and that's how we made our goals measurable, and that's how we worked on it. Okay, so that is your CPR, and that's how you get it on your IFSP to have your goals and how to get your goals measurable. Okay, so it's kind of what I talked about, your IFSP and your outcomes. So measurable goals were my outcomes. It's kind of like how we got our goals to be measurable, where the family and the professional collaborated to develop outcomes and to discuss completion priorities and look for other alternatives. One of the things that I really had to do was I had to write down things that worked. I wrote down things that didn't work. I had to make notes because we had to try a couple of things, put down things that that worked and things that didn't work, and adjust, and and do things like that. One of the things that I really do want my parents to know is that Early Steps is a teaching tool. So when your provider is there, parents are supposed to be there with the providers. So when that provider walks in that home and gets on the floor and starts teaching those skills, then that parent is supposed to be on that floor learning those skills, so that once that provider leaves, you can continue to teach those skills to your baby. Because otherwise, if that provider is only there one day a week, then your baby is only receiving services one day a week. If that provider only goes and receives services 1 hour every 2 weeks, then your baby is only getting 2 hours of service a month. And so sometimes when I tell it to my parents, they're looking at me like, oh, I didn't realize that. I didn't think about it like that. So, but yeah, that's really how it is. So if you're not on that floor learning those skills to continue those skills, then yes, your baby is receiving 2 hours of service a month. But if you're learning those skills and on that floor to continue those skills and say, oh, this worked, but this didn't work, let's adjust this because I find that this worked a little bit better, then yes, your baby is learning those skills, developing those skills, and will grow and actually can move on to something else and gain that skill and can develop that skill, and then we can move on to a different skill. So, and that's what we want. We want them to learn that skill, move on, so that we can move on to a different skill so that they can grow. I always tell my parents that our objective is to move from early steps, to grow from early steps. Yes, I know that having services is good because we know that our baby needs that early intervention, but we also want our babies to grow and no longer need the service. So that's a good thing. That is a great thing when they no longer need that service. Okay. So these are some examples of priorities and how they put their goals in place and things like that. Y'all will receive the PowerPoint, and so y'all can kind of go over those examples on your own. They have quite a few slides on some of the examples in this PowerPoint. So like I said, y'all can kind of read over that. Let's see. You can't really see this one. Wallace.
Yes.
Can you tell me at the top of this slide, is this an example? I can't really see with this. I have my heading.
It says when should I make changes to the IFSP?
Okay, when should you make changes? Okay. If you have the right to request an IFSP team, meet at any time. They will have held at least a quarterly. Request a meeting if your child is not making progress after several months of services. If your family feels overwhelmed with the amount of services provided. If your child has made progress and does not need as many services. So kind of some of the things that we just talked about. So yeah. So like I said, if you're overwhelmed, yes, you can, have less services. And as long as you keep your FSC, you do not have to lose early steps. So I do want my parents to remember that. Okay, so parents' role and responsibilities. Participate in an IFSP process. Participate with service providers to plan and carry out activities with their child and share knowledge and observations with the team. Inform your support coordinator of issues that may affect your child's services. Schedule your visit during time that is best for your child and your family. And be present and active during your meetings. Be on time for your scheduled appointments. And if for any reasons you can't make that appointment, please try and reschedule as soon as you know that you need to reschedule. Write down any questions that you may have and anything that you don't understand. Ask to be shown anything that you don't understand. An EOB is something that's given at cost participation for your cost participation. One of the things that I did want to mention right here is to make sure that you write down your hour of service. So whenever your provider goes in, write down that your provider came. So that way you can keep track of that. Because if you sign your EOB and your provider hasn't came, then you just signed saying that she came. And so you've just lost an hour of service. So keep up with that as much as possible. Be open and honest whenever your provider comes or, during your meetings as much as possible. We have RICCs on a quarterly basis. We have SICCs on a quarterly basis. If that's something that y'all interested in, please let me know, and I can definitely hook y'all up in attending those meetings. Okay, so transition. We have transition meetings. Those are addressed at every IFSP. They're supposed to be addressed at every meeting, at every single solitary meeting. I do have a webinar for transition itself. So if anybody is interested in transition, please sign up for my transition webinars. They're not very long. I think my transition part is maybe like 15 minutes, and then we go into like the school portion. And Miss Melinda helps me out with that. And it is an awesome, awesome webinar. So if y'all interested, please, please, please sign up. Okay, the family support coordinator. Yes, so your family support coordinator, which is your FSC, their job is to be your best friend. So anything that needs to be done as far as like paperwork, making sure all your documents are in order, that is to be handled by your FSC. They're supposed to make monthly phone calls and they're supposed to do quarterly visits. So if you have any types of issues, you are supposed to call your FSC. If you have an issue with your provider, you're supposed to call your FSC. If you have any issues with your services, you're supposed to call your FSC. So that's why I say your FSC is supposed to be your best friend. But if you need resources, you can call your FSC, but I am really and truly supposed to be your resource person. So you can definitely call me. Okay. So as I stated, your FSC will be collecting your financial information. She will be the one to be heading up all of your meetings and things like that. So she will be the one to be handling your transition. She will be the one that will be talking to you about your CPRs and making sure that your goals and your IFSP is in order and things like that. The provider role is to go in the home and make sure that your service is being provided. She is the one that will be going in the home, sitting on the floor and providing the service to the child. A lot of parents get the FSC and the provider mixed up. The provider is not the one that will be able to schedule your meetings. The provider is not the one that will not be able to tell you whether or not you can add a service or take away your service. That is your case manager. That is your FSC. The provider is only to provide the service. But a lot of my providers are very, very sweet. They will always try and help a parent out as much as possible. But in actuality, that is not their job. But like I said, they're very sweet and they will always assist my parents. A lot of times they will just call the FSC and say, hey, I have this parent and this is the help that she needs. And so then the FSC will call the parent and give them the answers that they're looking for. Or they'll call me and say, hey, this parent needs this assistance. So they still get the answers that they need, but they usually go to the provider and ask those questions when it needs to be either the FSC or me. So, but yes, that provider only job is to provide the service to the child. Okay. Okay, so as I said, these are some more examples and you can kind of go through those on your own and some helpful tips as well. Okay, very last slide, my very favorite is who do you contact? I love these. When you have a question about your IFSP, you contact your FSC. About scheduling a meeting, your FSC. Information about resources, that would be me. Information about your child's disability, you can contact my office here at Families Helping Families, and that would be me, your COS and your FSC. And about the SICC and the RICC, as I stated earlier, that would be me or the regional coordinator, Patrick Juno. And support groups, that would be my office, Families Helping Families, myself, the COS and the FSC. And to file a complaint, that would be the regional office here, which is MCAL. You need that information. And then it kind of talks about, this slide kind of talks about the goals, whether or not the goals that we went over. Help your child develop and learn and communicate your child's needs and understand your child's rights and help your family experience a successful transition at exit or age 3. Those are the areas that we covered. So I see that I am over by 10 minutes and my apologies. I think I went a little over in my stories. So I do apologize with that. Do we have any questions? Okay. I do not see any questions in the chat. Any questions? Okay, I do not see any. Thank y'all so much for attending. I really do appreciate it. And I wish you all a very, very great day and enjoy the rest of your week. Bye.